Hello, and welcome to the FLOURISH Podcast,
where we at the Palouse Conservation District interview farmers, ranchers, and researchers on topics in conservation agriculture. FLOURISH, also known as Farmers Leading Our United Revolution in Soil Health, is a farmer-led conservation innovation project to support the widespread adoption of soil health practices by integrating cover crops and livestock into farming operations.
The ambitious purpose of FLOURISH is to not only regenerate our soils, but also our rural communities by creating opportunities for younger generations to return to productive, sustainable farms.
On this podcast, we bring you updates from on-farm trials, research findings, and advice from farmers.
Hello, welcome back to the FLOURISH Podcast. This is our first one of 2025. And today we're on Apple Prairie Farms with Neil Appel. Neil, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Ryan.
I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your farming operation, where we are, how much rain you get.
Okay. So basically, I've been farming since 2005. I raise wheat and barley and alfalfa. I have feeder cattle and some sheep. I farm near Dusty, Washington. We're in the 15 to 16 inch annual rainfall. And
what does your crop rotation look like?
so historically, we've been running winter wheat, and then the next year it'll be spring wheat or spring barley, and then we do a chem-fall year following that. In the past, so my dad, he used to rod weed all summer, and then when I took over, I started experimenting with chem-fall, and I found it took a lot less time. So then basically 15 years ago, I converted the whole place over to all direct seed, and I run a cross-slot drill. It's been a large learning curve, but now everything seems to be going well. I can seed into 120 winter wheat stubble in the spring. So I have a lot of residue on top, which is ideal for the direction I'm headed.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for the background.
Yeah.
How many I don't know if you said this or not, but how many generations has your family been farming here?
So I'm the second generation on this farm. Down the road is where my grandpa, he started. I can't even remember when he started, but so he would be the third generation, I guess.
Nice. That's good. So the podcast is all about the FLOURISH program, which again, just for the people that are listening, that's Farmers Leading Our United Revolution in Soil Health. And Neil is one of those farmers. Can you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to participate in the program or how you got involved?
Okay, so a couple years ago, I guess 5 years ago, there was a alternative cropping symposium over in Pullman. So a group of us attended, and basically an individual, Mike Nestor, got up and he spoke about his cover crop experience, and all of us were sold. So we all jumped in and started the journey on a cover crop with a cereal grain or canola in the mix, and then I grazed that during the summer. The Nestor project didn't work out as well as we hoped for, but that got us thinking. And then Tammy Stubbs approached us and said, "Hey, if you guys are going to do all this experimenting, why don't you get paid for it?" And so that's why we joined FLOURISH, because it's exactly, we're going to do it anyway. Each of us had read the book by Gabe Brown, Dirt to Soil, and we were inspired. We knew this was the next step beyond no-till. We could see that we're using an extremely high amount of Roundup to combat weeds, and fertilizer. Well, at that time, fertilizer prices were going through the roof. Roundup was $53 a gallon, and we needed to find a different solution. And so we liked the idea of putting animals back on the ground and rejuvenating the soil health. Ultimately, with a better, healthier soil, we should have a healthier crop, which it means healthier food. All those were our non-essential goals in terms of the bottom line at the farm, but that was in an idealistic world, that is what would be accomplished. So that was
that's that's great. The common answer is Tammy Stubbs brought us into this, so, which is good. Yeah. And yeah, Tammy Stubbs was a coworker that used to work with us at the Palouse Conservation District. So did you experiment with cover crops prior to Mike Nestor at all, or was that the first time?
That was the first time that I had experienced cover crops. So the following spring, after that project, I put in winter peas early spring, and then I grazed those for 3 weeks. Cattle did great, 3 pounds a day. And then the following year, the winter wheat that came off of that ground yielded the same as my chem follow. And so without 2 sprains, plus a gain on the cattle. So it was a win. So yeah, with Mike's project, it just got us going, but no, I had not
done much before.
No.
You said there were some issues with that. Was it pest pressure, insect pressure?
So basically, the cover crop looked great. The winter wheat looked great because I put winter wheat in with the blend, like a cocktail mix of stuff, and I didn't put any fertilizer down on the ground. In the fall, I was supposed to fertilize it, and I ran out of time, and I didn't get it done. So during the course of the winter, I noticed that the winter wheat was starting to turn yellow. So I thought it just needed fertilizer, and that's what the agronomists agreed, is that we need to pour some fertilizer onto it just to get it growing again. So we did. And then we put a herbicide down, and it never got any better. So then we sent tissue samples away, and we found out that we had Highland wheat mosaic in the wheat, which is a tiny, tiny mite that you cannot see, and it spreads with the wind. And so we terminated it the next day, including some of my winter wheat to contain it in that area.
And the goal of that, if I remember correctly, was you were seeding cover crop with canola,
So the cover crop was with the winter wheat.
Oh, okay.
And one of the biggest challenges in a low rainfall area is that the wheat will not come up until it rains.
Yep.
Because the cover crop uses the moisture. And so the idea is that we're seeding it in the spring, or not spring, midsummer, July 1st or 2nd is when we seeded it. And then the winter wheat came up because there's plenty of moisture. Historically, like in July, August, when the heat arrives, then our moisture will disappear out of the seed zone area. And then it won't come back until September, October. So it's a great idea. It just didn't work out as well as we were hoping for. Today, I put the cover crops in the same timing as my spring crop, and I've experimented with a summer seeded cover crop. The challenge is seeding in the fall. If we don't have rain in September, the wheat doesn't come up until October, November. So that's a 20 bushel hit historically. This past year, that was not the case. We had a rain in June, and then my cover crop ground out yielded my regular chem follow ground, which was not I would not have expected that.
So that was the winter wheat following the cover crop?
Yes.
Oh. So I've heard a lot of people talk about, I've been in a bunch of these meetings, and the cover crop lag in yield. So following cover crop, oftentimes people see a yield drop or dip, but you didn't see that.
I didn't. No, not on this past year's cover crop.
And was there a bunch of legumes in there, or what was do you remember what the mix was?
I had peas in there, and then I don't know why.
Yeah. No.
I don't know why.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. I guess that's, what we're all trying to figure out.
Right. And I had a heavy, so basically as a 1-to-2 ratio of, 1.5, I had 1.5 cows per acre, basically.
Okay.
700 weight animals or 800 weight animals. They're 700 when I put them on, 800 when I pull them off. But, so it was grazed very heavily. We didn't manage it as well as we did this year. This year, the biggest challenge with running animals on a cover crop is figuring out how they would best suited to the ground, because we have hills, and so you can't just create paddocks everywhere. You have to lay it out so you have they all can come to water. Unless you're moving water every day, that's it just adds another level of complexity.
Yeah.
So basically, like this year, we created a wagon wheel. So the animals would always come to the center of the patch to water. They would go down an alley to the water, or they would, and it seemed to work well. I've tried roller crimping cover crops, and it didn't work out very well. But intensively grazing, moving the cows every day, is a 6-acre lot, and we had 72 animals on it. So every day we'd rattle a bucket, the cows would come running, and then they would open up a gate, and they'd go to the next patch, and they were ecstatic.
Okay.
Within a 2-day time period, the cover crop had recovered enough. So then by 6 days, it was tall enough for the cows to go back on.
Oh, interesting. So, and you're using hot wire to make the wagon wheel?
Yep. I use polywire. I have, I'm part of that. I had a single wire, hard wire all the way around. And that was, I don't know if that was necessary, but the rest of it, it's easy to roll out a single wire, and create the paddocks. And I have a energetic 20-year-old son who's happy to run up and down the hills and set up the paddocks and make it succeed. And I think that's key to having a lot of animals on the ground. Last year with, or I guess it's 2023, 24, that cover crop, we had it only set up was a 45-acre piece, and we had it set up in 3 paddocks. And so they were quite a bit bigger, and so they did a lot more walking than they needed to. Walking beef, you lose fat.
Mm-hmm.
You need that's the name of the game, is to put the beef on the animal. And so if they're walking all the time, they'll wear it off. But
do you think the wagon wheel was less labor intensive than like the paddocks that you're moving them to and from?
Initially it's more of a pain, but
set up,
but I think it worked well. So like this year I had a 50-acre piece, 25 acres. I had them on the whole piece, and the reason being is because the radishes were starting to bloom, and I needed it munched down. Mm-hmm. Well, they in a week time period, they didn't accomplish what I was wanting them to do. So I moved them I broke it down, the last 25 acres into the 6-acre paddocks. No, I had 6, they were 4-acre paddocks, 6 plots. I mean, that math works out a lot.
Yeah. That's good.
Anyway, so we had them, the goal was to terminate the cover crop with the cows. And so every day they're moving, and that worked. On the initial 25, we just didn't have the numbers to accomplish what we wanted. So I tried roller crimping, that didn't work. So then I mowed the whole thing, and that helped the plants stop going reproductive. But then the triticale, which was in there, it went ahead and shot up another hit. So I had to use Roundup to terminate the rest of that 25 acres. And then part of the challenge that we're having is that our pH has changed from what it used to be.
Is that getting lower or getting higher?
Well, it's getting lower, not necessarily because of the no-till, but because of the synthetic fertilizers we've been putting down.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the weeds that has moved into this country, which we never had before, is dog fennel. And so the dog fennel started coming in that cover crop, and the cows don't really care for dog fennel. So that is why I terminated. After I ran the cows for a 2-week session in those 6 different paddocks, I terminated the whole place with Roundup.
Yeah, that's a cool observation with the pH changes and the weed changes.
Right. So the idea is that with some of the stuff that I'm adding with my drill, the pH is changing and it's helping with aluminum toxicity, and then hopefully the weed spectrum will change.
What do you know, like on average, what the pH is, just for folks to know?
5.5 to 6.
Okay, yeah.
So I mean,
so
it's
like
not
right in that zone of.
It's not terrible, but I do have aluminum toxicity problems.
So can you just talk about that quickly for people that don't know?
In terms of
just like how aluminum toxicity it affects.
Okay, so basically with a new seedling, it starts shooting out fine roots, and if you pull up your plant and you do not see any hairs on your roots, then you have aluminum toxicity. The first thing that is the greatest way or the best way to determine if you have aluminum toxicity. I add some stuff from apical to my seed when I'm seeding, and basically I have hairs now. And so it's just protecting that little zone right around the seed. But the plant has to have the fine hairs to pick up water and to pick up nutrients from the soil.
And aluminum toxicity usually affects peas or all legumes, or is it all plant? All
plants.
Oh, wow. Okay. Can we go back to cattle for a second? So we were talking a bunch of weeks ago about, this is just me being naive on grazing cattle and selling cattle.
Okay.
And you were saying if the cattle is too heavy, like after it's been grazed on the cover crop, you could potentially take a hit when you take it to the stockyard. Is that true?
Yeah. So basically, the goal, my goal is to sell the cattle between 800 and 900 pounds, because if it gets to 1,000 pounds, then a feedlot won't want them as much, just because they can get the 900 to 1,000 a lot cheaper than
the 800 to 900.
Or they can put on the weight cheaper than a producer can.
Oh, gotcha. So when you bring it there,
they want to make money. So they want a uniform group of cattle in their feedlot. So ideally, they want 900-pound animals going into their feedlot. So then they take them from 900 to 1,600 pounds.
Okay. So like the rate of gain, like per day that you have them on the cover crop, like you really sort of have to watch until you get to that point and then get them off.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So everything has to line up. Like there is planning and philosophy. There is a philosophy as to what you're trying to accomplish. Like you want to buy animals with the end goal in mind. So last year I had the spring cover crop. Then I had a winter cover crop. Well, technically the spring cover crop was the FLOURISH program, and the summer cover crop was a NRCS program. Anyway, but then the cattle it just worked out that the summer, it worked out by planning that I could move the cattle right over to the next plot. Because a cow that has no feed cannot gain; they lose value. And so you always have to have a place for the cows.
Yeah. Okay.
And so like this coming year, I'll have to put another cover crop in for the cows to move to in July.
Right, because you planted a fall seeded.
Right. By July, I could potentially have weed issues. Like a cow will go and eat a Russian thistle or a prickly lettuce, but it will not eat dog fennel or one's cheatgrass. If the paddocks aren't managed well, then and the cheatgrass gets out of control, then it may have to be terminated. So the cheatgrass doesn't go to seed. The other challenge with the cover crops is some of the plants that we put into the cover crop mix do not do well. If they go to seed, that is not good in your winter wheat crop the following year.
And that would be triticale, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I had that issue as well. And so part of the cover crop part of the winter wheat from the previous year, I harvested separate, and then I binned it separate, and then I sold it separately to some individuals for feed.
Oh.
So.
Yeah. So it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. It's not. You can't just go plant a cover crop and then expect it to rejuvenate your soil, and just it's more of a hands-on sort of system. It's easier to just go out and pull the trigger and spray the whole thing. But not at $53 a gallon Roundup.
Right. And so, having livestock graze sort of helps with that, hopefully.
Right. And, I mean, the cattle gained well this year. I think they could have done a little bit better if we had gotten them on earlier. But I get cattle from one of my friends, and in addition to my own, and the cattle weren't ready. And so, but the cover crop was ready.
Yeah.
And so it's just
the timing.
Timing is key. Communication. But yeah, fence wasn't ready. Yeah. But I don't know. So
you own part of the cattle that you put on, and then your friend brings some cattle.
Yes.
And is that just like a handshake arrangement that you guys have? Yeah.
Yep. So we he pays based on the gain per day.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we take care of everything, the fence, water. Water is probably the biggest challenge when it's 100 and 110 outside for 3 weeks and the cows are in the middle of nowhere and no shade. It is very challenging to make sure they have water every day and that it's flowing into the tank.
Is that you guys hauling water every day?
We haul
multiple times
every other day. Okay. We're hauling 3,000 gallons.
Oh wow, yeah. So added level of complexity.
Right. And so so if the cattle are calm and they have water and they have feed, then even if the fence is dead, they will stay in.
Just hang out and be happy. Yeah,
they'll just hang out and be happy. But as soon as one of those elements is wrong, then they are gone, and that is not a very fun feeling when you come over the top of the hill and you see no cows and they're several miles away.
Have you mentioned sheep in the beginning? Have you grazed sheep on cover crops?
I have not at this point in time.
Yep.
The nice thing about cattle is I've been doing single wire electric fence. It's easy to put out and deal with. Historically, like my family has had sheep, or my dad started with sheep, and then at one point my dad and I had 200 head of sheep, and we were grazing them in different pastures. We're down a long ways now. We have between my son and I, we have 65. My son's goal is that eventually we will have 300 to 500 head of sheep and grazing cover crops, but we are not at that point, and that's a different fencing system.
And that would be permanent fencing, kind of, right? Or no?
You can do like they'll stay in 3-wire electric fence, but if there's the biggest problem with sheep is coyotes and wolves, and so then you're having to deal with either a herder and dogs. So when cows are harassed, they start running. and they'll go through a fence. Sheep will do the same thing. It's just sheep will be in 10 different directions.
Yeah. So instead of just running up the road, you're going,
Right.
Running up 10 different roads.
Yes.
We started talking about this before we started recording, but your nephew might try and set up a chicken tractor this year.
Yep. So he's gung-ho to convert an old camper into a mobile chicken hut. And then his goal is to follow the cattle in the cover crop, and then sell the eggs from that project. So we'll see how it works, but they can cover like a half an acre in a week. And so it's not going to be a lot of acres that he can cover, but basically we'll be focusing on the ridge where it's been windblown for centuries and the soil's poor, and so hopefully it'll help that.
And how many chickens was he going to put in?
Somewhere between 100 and 300 chickens.
Yeah, cool.
So we'll see how the first 100 do, and then whether he decides to upgrade.
Keep going.
So
that'll be interesting to see in the.
Oh yeah. Yep. So the cover crop I did a couple years ago, I purchased some the chicken manure from a company, and I put it through my drill and put it down with the cover crop, and the cover crop did well, and the winter wheat did well after that. So I think it'd be a good way to get cheap fertilizer. How's that?
Yeah.
So
was that easy to feed through the drill?
Yeah, it went fine.
Okay.
I mean, I have a double box in my drill, and so and I put it right in. And I so I can meter my seeds separate from the chicken manure, and then anyway, it seemed to work fine.
Maybe that's why you didn't see the lag.
Well, and it's very possible.
Yeah,
and that's where the winter cover crop is seeded now, is on that same ground. So one of the things that I noticed when I seeded the cover crop this fall in that particular ground where the chicken manure was at is that when I shut down one evening, I stepped out of the tractor on ground that was unseeded, and it was cushy. Like it was like spongy, and it wasn't wet, which is a very weird feeling for the place that I was
out here
seeding. Anyway, so there's things like the ground is active now. You walk across the road and it is rock hard. And so it's just so was the chicken manure part of that, or was it some of the other products I'm adding that are getting things going? But there's positive things happening. The goal is to have a greater revenue off of that ground. And we'll see, what happens, this coming year.
You talked about like the other products. Are you adding things you mentioned seed treatments maybe for the aluminum toxicity, but are you adding anything else? Not like specific product names, but.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm adding a complex carbohydrate in with my fertilizer. And then some amino acids, basically. And the idea behind those is that it's going to help the bacteria break down the fertilizer that I'm adding. So basically I've backed off on my fertility. So I'm at a 75% load. And I'm trying to get the soil to change, and so it starts feeding my crops. And I don't know. I'm not a soil scientist, or a plant biologist. So I don't know if it's accomplishing what I want, but the yields are fine. But the key is, like, one of the questions you gave me before, a June rain makes or breaks you, and that's what we had last year. So some of my test plots meant nothing because we had a June rain. I'm very thankful we had a June rain, but on the other hand, I would like to know if some of the stuff I'm doing, whether it's worth the extra money, or if that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely makes sense.
So
Yeah, it seems to me there's so many products out there that one could apply and spend money on. So yeah, you said like you're cutting your fertilizer rate by 75%.
or I'm at a 75% load, so I'm cutting it by 25%.
25%, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
But then maybe like the cost savings there is getting made up for with these other products that you're applying.
Exactly. But can I continue to back down?
Off, yeah.
Is in the future. Once the soil is helping grow my plants, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Definitely makes sense.
And I think having legumes in the cover crops to help feed the soil, I think that's key. And maybe I need to look into a different. I know PCD's now pushing peas.
Winter peas, yeah.
Winter peas. And maybe that's something we could look into if the price goes up. And that's another key point is that $5 wheat doesn't buy much.
Yeah.
And, so we need to be looking at alternative crops.
And, man, I think about this a lot. Do you think one of the issues there's a lot of issues, but the alternative crops is just like the markets for them? Like there's no markets locally for something other than wheat and carbs and peas.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, right now cattle are high.
Yeah.
And so you can make money if you have cattle. The alfalfa is down. So, I mean, there's a bigger margin out there for people in the cattle business. But there isn't a big margin in the wheat industry. Maybe selling privately to individuals or companies, you can make more money at it. And I've played around with that a little bit, with varying amounts of success, but a bakery can only use so much.
Well, that's what I think about all the time. Like not all the time, but I've thought about this quite a bit, is even if there were all these smaller, and I think it's a great thing, like direct marketing your grains, but there couldn't be enough direct markets for everybody that's growing wheat on the Palouse, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, absolutely.
But yeah, there is still room for that stuff to happen, and it is a good thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish there was more of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Hopefully we can figure out something else to grow that will bring the bottom line up.
So kind of along the same topic, and this could just be me, and I've asked other people on this podcast before, but do you think there is something happening with this regenerative ag movement, whatever you want to call it, like a shift in farming mentality towards something else? Maybe it's just like the circle that I'm in.
Yeah.
Is it like I always wonder if it's similar to what was happening in like the 70s when direct seed came in.
I believe that there is a shift within the community. Like when I started farming, they had Dennis Rowe had the direct seed breakfast. And the main thing that was talked about was what drill should you use, because people were interested in no-till. And so I remember listening to Gavin Porter on the crosslot drill and the guy from Horse, the guy at Pine City, I can't remember the name, but anyway, from Roselia, trying to sell a horse drill. And so during that time period, everybody is looking at no-till as the next big thing. Now, people don't talk about drills. Now it's all about soil health and the direction we need to be going. With the Roundup scare, people are thinking, well, when you're putting down 32 ounces to 64 ounces of Roundup, 4 times a summer, that's a lot of Roundup. And speaking of Roundup, it started as Roundup originally was an antibacterial. It was a soap, and they found it killed things. So then that was the beginning of Roundup.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And so that gets in. So if we're applying 32 to 64 ounces of Roundup, 4 times a year, it's killing our fungus in in the top inch or 2 inches of our soil. And we need that for a healthier plant. And so I think everybody's just, and then with Roundup, when it jumped so high, people were questioning whether we should be applying that much. Around the Dusty area, up until the last 5-6 years, the majority of the people rod weeded every summer. I mean, you'd see a plume of dust in the horizon because somebody is rod weeding every day, to kill the weeds. But now people are, for whatever reason, are changing over to that, and that's kind of the norm. And then, and so,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, so something's shifting.
Yes,
yeah, maybe it's the next step.
Right, and I believe it is the next step. It's getting to that point. I'm not sure. I think we're on to something. It's just figuring out the rotation. At the last breakfast, we listened to a guy, and he was talking about he's transitioning to organic farming. And that's like when we raise, the only reason we raise spring crop is for rotational purposes. So if we have winter wheat, and then we make it into chem-fallow, and then we seed it back to winter wheat the next year, we'll take a 20 bushel hit from if we had done winter wheat, then a spring grain, chem-fallow. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that is the benefit of a spring crop. But we can, if we did winter wheat, a cover crop in the fall, and then we follow it with a legume, and then we seed our winter wheat again, that takes out a bunch of Roundup. And then I don't know if that would pencil out. It all depends on what peas do.
Yeah.
Or garbs.
Yeah.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, the price and yeah.
Right.
That's cool. I feel like I was thinking about cover crops as just like one piece of the puzzle, right?
Right.
You're not going to like seed them and they're going to regenerate your soil automatically. No. It's like takes this long rotational process like you were talking about.
Right.
And then I haven't heard a ton of people talk about how it fits in like the full rotation. And everybody, every farm's different. Everybody has different theories too. But it's great to hear that you have like a vision for
how you
At least
that's
work.
How I envision it happening. So then you have, basically the legumes that are in the cover crop, they are feeding the cover crop, right? The nitrogen, what is necessary for their nitrogen needs. And then some of those cover crops are going down and they're mining minerals and they're bringing them up and they're breaking down during the pea cycle, I guess. And then the peas, whether the peas are taken to harvest, because a pea could also be just used as a green manure crop like I did in the very beginning. Like peas, theoretically, what I was told by somebody I respect, if a pea will produce moisture up to the point that they flower. So if you terminate them before they flower, then you haven't lost any moisture. But then they also can produce nitrogen to feed your winter wheat crop.
Yeah.
I mean, so the speaker, I think he was on to something worth looking into.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I view it. But all that said, I'm just experimenting.
Yeah.
A small, 50 acres or so to see if that would transition into something worth doing on the whole place,
farm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I have one more question on this, and then maybe we can shift gears. So in your ideal world, going back to what you were talking about, how you terminated the cover crop, like you ended up, it was grazed, and then part of it you roller crimped, and then you mowed, and then you sprayed.
Right.
And like, you don't want to have to do that.
No.
Like
no.
what would be your ideal way of like a termination?
So
method?
just on the 25 acres, that's how I had to terminate that one, just because I was trying to figure out one way that would work. And once you go around the field, you might as well do the whole piece. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of mowed strips.
Yeah.
Anyway, on the other piece, I terminated it with Roundup after the cows basically annihilated it. In an ideal world, we could graze it to the ground and then seed into it. And in essence, that's what I did on the warm season cover crop. I had the cattle on there right to the to right before I seeded, and so then I seeded directly into it, and then I hit it with Roundup before the wheat came up. It was dry anyway, so wheat wasn't going to come up until it rained.
Yeah.
So ideally, I guess I don't know.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we're trying to figure it out.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I don't like tillage, so I don't want to pull a speed disc to terminate stuff. We have too many places where it would have washed, and I don't have any ditches right now.
Yeah, that's great.
So I don't know. You have any recommendations?
Oh no, I mean I don't. It just seems like with the topography, the roller crimper is difficult. And yeah, I mean Roundup is another good tool that you can use. I guess if the mix was right, you could graze it and then winter kill it, but that's all like a timing.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. So if you're not trying to get a winter crop into the cover crop, then you could graze up until fall.
Yeah.
And then it winter kills. So yes, ideally that's what will happen this year, but I have not experienced that yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we'll see. Maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe next year.
Yeah.
How's that?
Sounds good. All right, so I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. So it does always seem like you guys, broadly speaking and stereotyping, are maybe like 3 steps ahead of where like the ag research is. And this is like no offense to any of the research universities around, because and then we're just trying to keep up with what you're doing. Are there things that you would like to see? The land grant universities or the conservation districts or whoever's doing research on this stuff focus on? And if not, that's totally fine too.
To be honest, I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's okay. Well, and from my perspective, like we'll talk and then I'm like, oh, whoa, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like we should do something to see what's actually going on.
Right.
And then even just after having conversations with you and like the rest of the Flourish group, it's like, oh, could we measure active fungi and active bacteria? Or can we look at more at what's actually happening with the soil microbiology?
Right. Right. And I think, with all this that we're doing, one thing that could be done is like, what progress are we making? Are we coming close to reaching our goals? Because I've sent soil tests away to have ag regen. Is that
regen ag? Yeah,
regen ag. To see if I've reached the regenerative criteria or whatever. But every soil is different. So have I changed enough to be considered regen, or what else should I be doing? What cover crops should I be putting in into the rotation that would be beneficial? I listened to a speaker, and you were at the meeting last winter, and the guy was putting cereal rye down and then roller crimping it and seeding it to corn. I think one of the last questions you asked in the sheet you gave me was, what is the neighbor's perspective of all this that I'm doing? And that would not be looked well upon in the Dusty Lacrosse area.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, cereal rye is used as a cover crop in the Midwest, like quite a bit, and like very successfully.
Yeah.
And why is it not used here? Because
of the rye problem down at Hay and Central Ferry.
Oh, okay. So like it contaminated a bunch of.
Yeah. So cereal rye and hay.
Okay.
It's everywhere, and the only way to get it out of winter wheat is to some people have tried to use chemistry like Coaxim wheat or the other Beyond Wheats and that sort of thing, but with varying amounts of success. The best way is to get a crew in and to rogue it out of the fields. So the challenge of putting cereal rye in and then roller crimping it is that not all of it's going to die. And so then you're going to have to round up it anyway.
Could you? I'm not playing devil's advocate here, but could you follow something like that with like a winter pea, and then use different chemistry to control it, or no?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not trying to push anything. I'm just wondering.
Right. No, I like the idea behind the cereal rye.
Yeah,
but can we do that with triticale or
totally? Yeah,
or something that is controllable?
That's not a bad idea. Have your neighbors said anything about the cover crop trials or anything that you've been doing?
They were confused why I was building a fence, and then my crop is very green when it should be yellow.
Yeah.
But nobody's really said too much. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I think this is our.
They're concerned when the cows are out and they're in their field.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I guess they view it as free beef if they catch it. So,
this is my last question, and we ask everybody this that we interview for the podcast. Were there things that you learned this year or the last year? Like, could you talk about like the good, the bad, the ugly of the Flourish trials?
Well, so like reading some of the books that I've read or listening to different people, there is no magic bullet to convert the soil. I think number one, I think animals are a necessity in the cover crop system. I've tried a varying amount of different things in my with my mixes or with my so the problem is with the cover crop is that I'm doing it on 30 to 50 acres, and taking it, full scale is going to take a lot of fencing, a lot of cattle. And so trying to find something I can add to the fertilizer mix or whatever and just mimic what nature can do on its own. I don't know if that's possible. I'm hopeful still, and the jury's out, but that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah,
or hoping to learn in the next couple of years.
Yeah, hoping to learn is that. On the other hand, I like running the cows, and so some more cows. Maybe that's not a bad thing too. So it's another revenue stream. Having the cattle on the place, which is good. So
was there anything bad, like really bad?
The worst part. Well, it's always worrisome. You see the winter wheat, it comes up, or when it rains, it comes up. So that's always worrisome. We've been very fortunate this winter that it's replenished our soil profile with water. So it's always worrisome, when you seed, whether or not it's going to come up. So dealing with landlords, that can be a challenge.
No, that's good. Great. Well, thanks for joining us today, Neil.
Yep. You're welcome, Ryan. So.
This podcast was brought to you by the Palouse Conservation District. Funding is provided by USDA's Conservation Innovation Grants Program.
To find out more information, check out the Flourish website at inwflourish.org.
Thanks so much for listening, and keep an eye out for our next episode.